Chapter 1. The Wrong Shift at the Wrong Hour. The last table of the night always left the worst tip. I'd learned that in my first week at Rosario's, a corner diner on the edge of the meatpacking district that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and onion rings, and something vaguely like desperation. 3 years later, I still believed it. Table 9. 2 men in suits who'd nursed their waters for 40 minutes left me 2 crumpled dollars and a business card I didn't ask for. I stuffed both into my apron without looking. Mara, Danny the line cook, knocked twice on the pass-through window. Last orders out. You good to close? Always am. He grinned, showed the gap between his front teeth, and disappeared into the back. 30 seconds later, I heard the rear door slam. I was alone. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, and the rain had been falling since 6 o'clock. Not a dramatic rain, not the kind that came with thunder and purpose, but a cold, fine mist that soaked through everything and made the city feel like it was dissolving at the edges. I wiped down the counter, refilled the sugar dispensers, flipped 2 chairs upside down onto their tables. The fluorescent light above the register flickered twice, the way it always did, and I barely noticed anymore. What I noticed was the car. It was parked across the street, a black Mercedes, no plates, engine running. It had been there since 10. I'd seen it when I stepped outside to pull in the sidewalk sign. I'd filed it away under probably nothing, the way you do when you live in New York, long enough to stop letting every strange thing mean something. But then the back door opened. A man stepped out, tall, dark coat. He moved with the specific kind of unhurriedness that isn't peace, it's control. Like someone who has never, not once in his life, been in a hurry because the world has learned to wait for him. I couldn't see his face from where I stood, just the shape of him against the wet amber glow of the streetlights. The way his shoes didn't splash, he stepped between the puddles, precise, deliberate, struck me as somehow wrong, like a man who'd been trained to leave no mark. A second man came around from the driver's side. Shorter, wider. He handed the tall one something, I couldn't tell what, and they stood together for a moment, both of them looking at a building 2 doors down from the diner, a shuttered laundromat, according to the sign, but the lights were on inside. None of my business, I thought. I turned back to the counter. I don't know what made me look again, maybe the quality of the silence. The rain was white noise, but suddenly beneath it I heard something that made my chest tighten. A sound like a door hitting a wall. A single raised voice, cut short. When I looked, there were 4 men now. 2 from the laundromat, moving fast, not toward the street but toward the alley beside the building. And the tall one, he wasn't watching them leave. He was watching the alley entrance, perfectly still, head slightly tilted. Then the shorter man raised his arm. The sound wasn't loud. I'd always imagined gunshots would be louder. It was sharp. A crack. And it echoed off the brick and disappeared into the rain almost before I'd processed it. One of the men from the laundromat went down. My hand had knocked over a salt shaker. I heard it hit the floor before I realized I'd backed away from the window. Go to the back. Lock the door. Do not move. That's what my brain said. What my body did was freeze. The tall man turned. He turned, and somehow, through the rain-blurred glass, across a 4-lane street with my diner's fluorescent light making me a perfect glowing target. He looked directly at me. I don't know how long that lasted. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Long enough that I felt it in my sternum, like a pressure change, like the second before your ears pop on a plane. Then I grabbed my bag from under the counter and ran for the back. I heard the bells above the front door chime anyway. I was at the rear exit, key in hand, when the footsteps reached me, unhurried, even now, even after everything, and a voice said, "Don't." Single syllable. Low. Absolute. I spun around. He was closer than he should have been. 6 feet, maybe less. Dark eyes, darker circles beneath them. A jaw like something carved and then reconsidered. He was wet from the rain. His coat, his hair, and he was looking at me the way people look at a problem they haven't decided how to solve yet. I didn't think. I just reacted, the way you do when fear outpaces reason. "Don't get in the car." I heard myself shout, at him of all people. at the man who just watched someone get shot. And the words came from some older animal part of my brain that had apparently decided warning strangers off dangerous vehicles was my best available strategy. He stared at me. Something shifted in his face. Not quite amusement. Not quite surprise. Something quieter than both, and more unsettling than either. I wasn't planning to, he said. But you are. My key was still in my hands, my bag was on my shoulder. The rear door was 18 inches behind me, and somehow, I don't know how, I still don't understand it. I knew that if I ran, he would let me. And that would be so much worse. Chapter 2. The name they don't say twice. His name was everywhere in the city the way rot is. Invisible until something breaks open. I didn't know that yet. In that back hallway of Rosario's diner, fluorescent light buzzing overhead and rain tapping the metal door behind me, I only knew that I was standing 12 inches from a man who had just witnessed a shooting and hadn't flinched once. I'd flinched. I'd knocked over Salt. I'd shouted at him. He looked like he was filing all of this away. "I'm not getting in any car," I said. My voice was steadier than I deserved credit for. "I don't know you. I don't know what just happened out there. And I'd like to keep it that way. So if you could leave through the front." They saw you at the window. 3 words. No elaboration. He said it the way people state weather. I felt the cold work its way up from somewhere below my ribs. "Who did?" He didn't answer. Instead he moved, not toward me, sideways, and checked the rear door's small window with a single, efficient glance. His profile was sharp in the bad light. A scar ran along his jaw, thin and old, the kind that had long since been accepted and forgotten by the person wearing it. "I have a phone," I said. "I'll call the police." "You can." He turned back. "It won't help you tonight. The 2 officers on duty in this precinct work for the man whose associate I just removed from the situation. Removed from the situation, like it was a scheduling conflict. "Who are you?" I asked. His eyes settled on mine. They were very dark. Not warm dark, not soft dark, but deep in the way that things are deep when they have no bottom. "Nico Vasari." He said it simply. The way you'd say Tuesday or rain, like it explained everything and required nothing more. It didn't mean anything to me then. That was its own kind of information, I'd later understand. That I was one of the few people left in this city who could hear that name cold. "Okay, Nico Vasari." I gripped my bag strap. "I didn't see anything. You saw everything. I saw a street, some men, it was raining and the glass was foggy, and you watched for 40 minutes. His head tilted again, slightly. That habit of his. I would come to know it as the moment before a decision, not after. "I saw you watching." The salt shaker I'd knocked over was still on the floor. Some part of me was acutely aware of it. The small, stupid realness of it. The way ordinary things stay ordinary, even when everything around them tips sideways. 40 minutes, I repeated. "You were counting." "I count everything." The rear door handle rattled, not from wind. Nico moved before the sound had fully reached me. Stepped past me, close enough that I caught the smell of him. Rain and something underneath it. Cedar or smoke or both. And he put one hand flat on the door and with the other reached into his coat. "Back hall," he said. "Left door, do not open it until I tell you. I don't take orders from." He looked at me over his shoulder. Just looked. And something about it, the complete absence of threat in it, the almost bored certainty that I would do what he said because the alternative was a fact he didn't need to state aloud, moved my feet before my brain signed off. I went down the hall. I found the door, a supply closet, shelves of industrial cleaner and paper towel rolls, the deep smell of mildew. I left it open an inch. I heard the rear door open. Heard voices, too. Low. Foreign accented. Heard Nico's voice. Single sentences in what I thought might be Italian, the cadence flat and without warmth. Then silence. Then the door again. His footsteps came back. "We have approximately 11 minutes, he said through the gap in the closet door, "before the outer block is covered." Covered by who? By people who would like to speak with you about what you witnessed tonight. The conversation would be brief and one-sided. I pushed the closet door open. He was standing in the hall, phone in hand, typing something without looking at the screen, which should have been impossible and somehow wasn't. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He looked up. For a moment, the question seemed to genuinely land. I watched something behind his eyes register it, briefly, like a stone dropped in still water before the surface closes again. "I'm not helping you," he said. "You're a complication. I'm managing a complication." It should have been insulting. It was insulting, but there was something almost honest in it that was harder to dismiss than reassurance would have been. "The car outside," I said, "is mine. I'm not getting in it." He slid the phone into his coat pocket, looked at me with that same quality of patience that had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with certainty. "You already decided you are," he said. "You decided it 20 seconds ago when you didn't run." I hated that he was right. I hated more that he knew it. The fluorescent light above us flickered twice. In the brief darkness between flickers, I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and treacherous, and the rain against the roof, and absolutely nothing else. 11 minutes, I said. 9 now. I grabbed my bag off the floor where I'd dropped it and walked past him toward the front of the diner, because I refused to let him lead me out of my own workplace like I was cargo. Behind me, almost too quiet to catch. Good. Just that. Like I'd passed a test I hadn't known I was taking. Chapter 3. What the roses on the wallpaper knew. The car was warmer than it had any right to be. That was the first thing that surprised me. Not the leather. Not the soundproofed silence as the door closed and the city became something that happened to other people. But the warmth. Like it had been running long enough to reach a temperature calibrated specifically for comfort. And someone had cared enough to do that. I sat behind the driver and watched the wet streets pull past the window and told myself I was cataloging exits. There was another man in the front passenger seat. He hadn't been introduced and hadn't spoken. Young, close-cropped hair, the kind of stillness that comes from discipline rather than temperament. He held his phone screen down on his knee. Nico sat beside me. Not close. There was a foot of space between us. But in the enclosed dark of the car, I was aware of every inch of him. The way he breathed, slow and measured. The faint sound of his coat settling when the car turned. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere they can't follow tonight." "That's not an address." "No," he agreed. He didn't elaborate. I watched his reflection in the window. He was looking forward, or down at his hands. Both, maybe. His hands were folded in his lap with the same deliberate quiet as the rest of him. There was a ring on his right hand, not his left. Dark metal, simple band. No initials, no crest. Just a ring worn so long it had left its mark. "The man who got shot," I said. "Was he going to?" "Yes." "You don't know what I was going to ask." "You were going to ask whether he was going to hurt someone." A pause. He was. I looked away from the window. "Are you the good guy in this scenario?" The driver made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Nico's expression didn't shift. "There are no good guys in this scenario, Mara." I startled. "How do you know my name?" "Apron." His eyes flicked to my chest briefly, without appraisal. Just information gathering. "Name tag. Mara." He'd said it naturally, not carefully, the way people say names when they're trying to remember them. Like it had settled somewhere in his memory without effort. "This is kidnapping," I said. "You walked out of the diner voluntarily. Under duress. Legally ambiguous." I turned to face him fully. "I want to go home." He looked at me then, properly, which he hadn't done much of in the diner. In the passing streetlights, his face moved through shadows, and for a fraction of a second I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Not cruelty, not calculation, but something tired, an exhaustion he carried too close to the surface and usually kept below it. "Your apartment is on Clement Street," he said. "3rd floor. You have a neighbor named," he paused. "That head tilt. Francesca, who lets her cat into the hall. You walk home from Rosario's on nights the subway feels unsafe. Tonight, It is unsafe. The warmth of the car felt different now. You've been watching me, I said. I've been watching that block for 6 weeks. Why? Because the men who just tried to reach you through the back door of your diner have been watching that block for 8. He said it without menace. That was somehow worse. The car turned off the main road and moved through a neighborhood I recognized vaguely. Older buildings, wrought iron fences, the kind of brownstones that cost what I'd make in a decade. It slowed and stopped in front of one that looked like all the others from the outside. Dark windows, stone steps, a door the color of old blood. "Come inside," Nico said. "You say that like it's a suggestion. It is." He reached for his door handle. "Everything I've said tonight has been a suggestion. You've taken all of them." I looked at the building. I looked at the street. I thought about my apartment on Clement Street, the 3rd-floor window with the cracked caulk I'd been meaning to fix, Francesca's cat crying in the hall. I thought about the sound of that single shot. I got out of the car. Inside, it was all high ceilings and old wood, and the smell of books, and something floral. Roses, I thought, before I saw the wallpaper in the entrance hall. Dark red roses on a cream ground, slightly faded. The kind of wallpaper that had been chosen by someone long dead and never changed because changing it would cost something other than money. A woman appeared from a side door, 60, maybe. Silver hair, no expression. She looked at me, then at Nico, then back at me. "The yellow room?" Nico said. She nodded and disappeared up the stairs. "You have staff," I said. "I have people. Is there a difference?" "Significant." He moved to a door off the hall. A study, from what I could see, dark furniture, lamplight, the spine of books. Then he paused, hand on the door frame, and looked back at me. "No one here will hurt you," he said. "That's not a suggestion. It's the only true guarantee I can make tonight." I looked at the roses on the wall. Their printed petals repeated, perfect and permanent, all the way up the staircase. "What's the yellow room?" I asked. "The room where people sleep when they're not ready to trust anything yet." I didn't answer, but I followed the silver-haired woman up the stairs, and I didn't look back, because I knew if I looked back at him, I would see that tiredness again, brief and unintended, and I wasn't ready to know what it meant. Chapter 4, The Architecture of Danger. I didn't sleep. The yellow room was exactly what it sounded like, walls the color of old butter, a bed with white linens turned down with military precision, a window overlooking the back garden where rain had pooled in the stone birdbath until it overflowed. The lamp on the nightstand had an amber shade that made everything look warmer than it was. Someone had left folded clothes on the chair. My size, approximately. I didn't touch them. I sat on the edge of the bed until 3 a.m., listening to the house breathe. It wasn't silent, no house this old ever is. There were footsteps, deliberate and patterned, on what I judged to be the floor above me. A door closing somewhere below. Once. Voices. 2 men. Close and quick. Nothing I could parse through the walls. Then nothing for a long time. Then footsteps again. Slower. 1 person. Stopping outside my door. I held my breath. They didn't knock, just stopped for a moment, a pause that lasted 4 or 5 seconds, and moved on. I was still thinking about it at dawn, at 6 a.m. The silver-haired woman, Renata, she told me without being asked, setting a tray on the low table by the window, brought black coffee and toast and looked at my untouched clothes with a small, unsurprised expression. "He'll see you at 8, she said. "I haven't agreed to be seen." "No," she said pleasantly and left. The coffee was very good. I hated that. At 7:50, I put on the clothes, dark trousers, a gray sweater, both well made in ways that felt expensive without being demonstrative. Because my uniform from last night smelled like the diner and putting it back on felt like a defeat of a different kind, I kept my own shoes. The study was exactly as I'd glimpsed it the night before. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, a desk that belonged in a different century, lamps instead of overhead light so the room existed in a permanent amber dusk regardless of the hour. Rain still pressed against the tall windows. The garden below was silver and still. Nico was standing at the window with his back to me, phone to his ear, speaking in low Italian. He held up one finger without turning one moment, and I stood near the door and looked at the bookshelves instead of at him. The books were real, read, not displayed, spines cracked, pages flagged with slips of paper, history mostly, military history. 2 shelves of what looked like legal documents and binders. A small section of poetry that surprised me so much I looked twice to confirm it. He ended the call, turned. In daylight, he looked different. Not softer, exactly, but more present, more dimensional. The shadows that had helped him in the diner and the car were gone, and what remained was a man of maybe 35 with a face that had been lived in, not just worn, and eyes that did the thing again, that thing of landing on mine and staying. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you." He moved to the desk and sat, not in the main chair, but on the edge of it, which seemed somehow like a concession. One hand flat on the desk surface, that ring again, catching the lamplight. "I need to tell you something about last night," he said. "About what you saw." "I told you. I didn't see." "Stop. Not unkindly. You're smart. Don't perform otherwise. It insults both of us." I crossed my arms. "Fine." The man who was shot worked for a family called the Sorrentes. They run distribution, product, weapons, and increasingly information through 3 boroughs. The building you saw them enter was a collection point. Information, not product. Last night was about disrupting a transfer. Why are you telling me this? Because you'll hear it from someone else by tonight, and I'd rather it come from me first. Why does it matter who tells me? He looked at me. That pause before a decision. Because how you hear something determines what you believe about it, he said. And what you believe about me tonight will determine every choice you make tomorrow. I felt the weight of that, the architecture of it, the way he was already thinking 3 moves ahead, mapping influence and trust like terrain, and I was only now arriving at the starting square. "Who are you?" I asked. "Really? Not your name? Who are you?" He was quiet for a moment. The rain shifted against the glass. "I run the northeastern operations of the Vasari family," he said. "That's a phrase that sounds contained. It isn't. It means I'm responsible for approximately 200 people and their families, 3 separate ongoing agreements with political offices, and a war that has been building for 18 months between my operation and the Sorrentes." He paused. "It also means that as of last night, they know I was on that block, and they know you were watching." I sat down. I hadn't planned to, but my legs made the decision. "I'm a waitress," I said. "You're a witness." "To what?" "I don't even know what to the fact that I was there." His voice was even. "That's enough. The Sorrentes don't need you to testify. They need you to remind me that I'm not untouchable." The room was very quiet. Outside, a pigeon landed on the window ledge, assessed the rain, and departed. "So I'm a message," I said. "You were going to be." He stood. "You're not. Not while you're here. Here, his house, his rules, his people. And when I leave?" He looked at me with that specific gravity of someone who has already seen the end of a conversation and is waiting patiently for you to arrive there too. "We'll discuss that," he said, "when you're ready to have that conversation honestly." I understood then that I was not, whatever else I was, a guest. Chapter 5. The weight of shared air 3 days. That's how long I stayed without agreeing to stay. A distinction I kept making to myself and that Nico never challenged, which was its own form of control I didn't fully understand until later. He didn't confine me. I could move through most of the house, the study, the kitchen, the long parlor at the back that faced the garden. There were men outside. I'd see them from windows, stationed at the perimeter with the same quiet discipline as the young man in the car. No one spoke to me unnecessarily. No one followed me from room to room. On the second afternoon, I asked Renata for my phone. "It's been replaced," she said. "Replaced with." She handed me a new one, already charged, with my contacts transferred. The old one had been compromised. Mr. Vasari had it addressed. Compromised. Meaning someone had been in it. meaning someone had known more about me than a stranger who'd happened to glance through a rainy diner window. The thought sat in my chest, cold and specific, like swallowing a stone. I called my friend Dana, told her I was staying with a colleague. She believed me, or pretended to, which was the same as believing me with Dana. I didn't call my manager. I was 3 days into a no-call absence from a job I'd held for 3 years, and I couldn't figure out how to explain any of it, so I didn't try. On the third evening, Nico was in the kitchen. I'd never seen him there before. He was standing at the counter with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the elbow, reading something on his phone and eating an apple in the specific, distracted way of someone who has forgotten that eating is a choice they're making. He was barefoot on the stone floor, which struck me as so deeply incongruent with the rest of him that I stopped in the doorway without meaning to. He looked up. "Hungry?" he said. "I can. Sit down." He moved to the refrigerator, opened it, surveyed it with a faint frown. "Renata doesn't cook past 7. There's bread, leftovers. I don't need you to. I'm not doing it for you." He was already pulling things out. "I'm making myself something, and you're here." I sat at the kitchen table. The overhead light was on, just this room, just now, and it changed everything, stripped the amber mood of the rest of the house, and left us in something closer to ordinary. He moved around the kitchen with a familiarity that suggested he'd been here before the staff, before the house became whatever it was now, when it had been something else. "You know how to cook?" I said. "I know how to feed myself. Different thing." "Where'd you learn?" A pause. He set bread on a board, began slicing. "My mother left when I was 9, he said. My father was often unavailable, cooking or starving. He said it with zero performance, not to evoke sympathy or signal depth. Just this is what was true." "I'm sorry," I said. He glanced at me briefly. "Don't be, it was useful." We were quiet for a while. Outside the kitchen window, the garden was black and still. The rain had finally stopped an hour ago, and the sudden absence of it made the city feel strange, like something waiting to exhale. He set a plate in front of me, bread, cheese, olives, something from a jar that turned out to be roasted peppers. Simple, exactly enough. "Thank you," I said. He sat across from me with his own plate and picked up his phone again, which should have made it impersonal, a man eating in the presence of an inconvenience, managing his messages, but didn't. There was something in the fact of sharing the table and the kitchen light that couldn't be undone by looking at a screen. After a few minutes, I said, "My manager called. 3 times. I know. I need to go back to work." "Not yet." "You can't just." I stopped, breathed. "You cannot make decisions about my life." He set his phone down, looked at me across the bread and the olives and the ordinary wreckage of an improvised dinner. "One of the Sorrenti family's men was photographed 2 blocks from Rosario's this afternoon," he said, "at 3 p.m. in daylight." He paused. He was watching the diner. I felt my appetite close like a door. "Still," I said quietly. "Still." I looked at the roasted pepper on my plate, red and bright, too vivid. "What did I walk into?" I asked. Not accusatory. Just genuinely asking, finally, the question I'd been circling for 3 days. He was quiet for a moment that lasted long enough to mean something. "Something that was already there," he said. "You just made yourself visible." I looked up. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Not soft, but careful. The way you're careful around something you've decided matters. I didn't want to know when he'd decided that or why. The thought was too warm and too dangerous, and I put it away. "I want to understand," I said. "The full picture, not fragments. That's a significant thing to ask for." "I know." He studied me for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair, one arm on the table, and in the honest overhead light of the kitchen, he looked like a man sitting with a weight he'd been carrying alone for a long time, considering, perhaps for the first time, whether to set it down. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "I'll explain what I can. What you can, or what you want me to know." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more worn than that. "I haven't decided yet," he said. Chapter 6, The Crack in the Stone. He kept his word. In the morning, he took me to the study. Not to the desk, but to the pair of chairs, by the window overlooking the garden, as though the formality of the desk was a distance he'd chosen not to keep. And he told me, not everything. I understood later that what he gave me was a shape of the truth, curated by someone who had been dealing in partial information for so long that complete disclosure felt physically uncomfortable. But it was more than I'd had, and it was honest in the ways that counted. The Sorrentis had been moving toward a consolidation. That was the word he used. Consolidation. For what I came to understand was an absorption by force of 3 smaller operations, including a network that had long managed, among other things, certain city council members and 2 judges on the federal circuit. Nico's family hadn't built those relationships. They'd been built over 30 years by a man named Carver, whose only surviving heir had come to Nico 6 months ago asking for protection. And you agreed, I said. I agreed. Why? He looked at the garden. The rain had left everything saturated, dark bright in the morning light. A bird was working at something in the wet grass, because Carver's people move food through 3 burrows, he said. Not drugs, not weapons, food. Supply chains, distribution, cold storage. 1,600 families depend on a network his daughter now runs. The Sorrentis would take it and strip it. I watched his profile. You said there were no good guys, I said. There aren't. He looked back at me. There are better and worse choices in a landscape that offers only bad ones. Don't mistake them for virtue. But you made the better choice. I made the useful choice. They aligned. I thought about that, about the precision of a man who refused to allow himself the small comfort of believing he was good. What happened that night, I asked, specifically. The Sorrentis were collecting intelligence from the laundromat, a relay point, digital. They were building a case to take to the judges before I could counter it. I went to interrupt the transmission. He paused. The man who was shot drew first. He was not going to miss. Silence. He was going to shoot you, I said. Yes. And you? Yes. I looked at my hands. The morning light was very clear and pale through the window glass, and it made everything look like something before it happened. I don't know how to hold that, I said quietly. You don't have to. Someone died. Someone died to prevent 3 others from dying, and potentially a network that feeds 1,000 people from collapsing. He said it evenly. I can give you the arithmetic. I can't give you the comfort. For a long moment, we just sat there. The bird in the garden found what it was looking for and flew away. Do you sleep? I asked. He blinked. It was the first time I'd seen him caught off guard. Why? I hear you, I said. At night, walking. His jaw shifted slightly. He looked at the window. Not much, he said finally. Not lately. How long is lately? Another pause. The quality of silence in the room changed, became more deliberate, as though he was deciding how much weight to add to it. 18 months, he said. Since this started. 18 months of a war he was carrying. 18 months of better choices in a landscape of bad ones. I looked at the ring on his right hand and thought about all the marks left by things worn long enough. The poetry, I said. He looked at me. On your shelf, 2 shelves, 3rd section in. It surprised me. Something in his expression moved. Not quite the way it moved in the kitchen the night before. More guarded than that, but present. Like being caught at something private that he hadn't decided was shameful yet. My mother left books, he said. When she left, it was all she left. I felt the tenderness of that land like something physical. This man who ate apples distracted, who kept his dead mother's poetry on the shelf, who hadn't slept properly in a year and a half and wouldn't let himself call the choices he made good. I reached across the space between our chairs and put my hand over his. I don't know why. It wasn't romantic, wasn't planned, wasn't something I could explain afterward with any precision. It was the same instinct that makes you reach toward a candle flame before a sense catches up. Not because you want to burn, but because the light has been going for a long time and you want it to know you see it. He looked at my hand. He didn't pull away. For exactly 5 seconds, I counted without meaning to. He let it stay. His hand was very still beneath mine. Then he turned it, just slightly, so that his thumb rested against my wrist, and I felt my own pulse against his. He felt it too. I knew by the way he went very quiet. Then his phone rang. Jarring, breaking the room open, and he stood in one motion, the line of his body back to straight and controlled, and answered it in Italian without looking at me. I sat with my hand in my own lap and watched the empty garden and felt the exact contour of what had just changed and could not be unchanged. Chapter 7. What breaks first? I found the photograph by accident. Renata had sent me for a reference book she needed in the study. Something about property records, she'd described it, a navy blue binder, 3rd shelf right side, and I'd found the binder and was turning to leave when the photo fell from between 2 books to the floor. Glossy paper, printed in color. Timestamp in the corner, 8 days ago. It was a photograph of me. Leaving Rosario's after a day shift. Carrying a canvas bag, my hair pulled up, a coffee cup in my free hand. Captured mid-stride, from across the street, with the specific long-lens flatness of surveillance. I stood there for a moment, looking at myself. Then I looked at the shelf it had fallen from. There were others behind the book. I could see the edge of a second photograph, and when I pulled it free, a third. Different days. Different times. One at night, the diner glowing behind me. One on a Saturday when I'd gone to the farmer's market 3 blocks away, laughing at something on my phone that I couldn't remember anymore. Weeks of photographs. Not the Sorrentis. The paper quality was different. The angle, always clean, always unobstructed, was professional in a way that suggested access, not opportunity. My face felt cold. I set the photos on the desk. I set the navy binder beside them. I sat in the chair by the window and waited. He found me. 40 minutes later, came in talking, something about a call he needed to make that afternoon, and stopped when he saw my face. Then he saw the desk. The room went very still. "Sit down," I said. It was the first time I'd said it to him. The words came out steady, which surprised me, because inside my chest was doing something I couldn't afford to let into my voice. He didn't sit, but he came to the desk and looked at the photographs without touching them. "How long?" I asked. "Mara, how long before that night?" A muscle in his jaw moved. 4 weeks. 4 weeks. I said it back to him like I was testing the weight of it. "You were watching me for 4 weeks before any of this happened." I was watching the block. There are 30 people who walk that block routinely. You don't have photographs of all of them. Silence. "Why me?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment that told me he was choosing between versions of the answer. I watched him decide. "Because 6 weeks ago, a Sorrenti associate was seen speaking to your coworker, a man named Danny. We didn't know if Danny was recruited or just convenient. We surveilled everyone he had regular contact with. I thought of Danny, his gap-toothed grin, the way he knocked on the pass-through window. 'You good to close?' 'Danny,' I said flatly. He was passing information. Shift schedules, delivery times. The diner shares a supply route with Carver's distribution network. He didn't understand what he was doing, most likely. He's been relocated. Relocated. The word was wrong and I heard it. What does that mean? He's safe." Nico's voice was even, but something underneath it wasn't. "He's out of the city. He'll stay out." "And me?" I stood. The sun through the window was too bright now, too accusing. "You decided I was involved because I knew Danny? Because I worked the same shifts? We decided you were unknown, a variable." He turned to face me fully. "Then you became a witness. And then?" He stopped. "And then what?" His jaw tightened, and then the parameters changed. "The parameters," I repeated. "I'm a variable in your parameters." "That's not what You put photographs of me in your bookshelf, Nico." My voice cracked slightly on his name and I hated it. "Weeks of them. And you brought me here and told me nothing and let me..." I stopped. Breathed. "Let me start to trust you." He moved toward me. I stepped back. Not in fear. in a kind of self-protective instinct that recognized what proximity would do right now. "Don't," I said. He stopped. "I'm not a mission," I said. "I'm not a complication. I'm not a variable." My voice was steadier now, steadier than I felt, the way it got when I crossed past fear into something colder. "I'm a person who worked a double shift and went home every night to her own apartment and had absolutely nothing to do with any of this." "I know," he said quietly. "Then why? Because you were in danger before I found you." His voice dropped. Not flat. Something in it raw and careful at the same time. The photographs were intelligence, standard, and then they were... He stopped again. And for the first time since I'd met him, I watched him not find the next word. They stopped being standard. The room held his unfinished sentence. I looked at his face in the sharp window light, the scar along his jaw, the exhaustion he wore underneath the control, and felt the most dangerous thing I'd felt since this began. I understood him. I didn't want to. Understanding was a door, and once it was open, it only swung one way. "I need to be alone," I said. He nodded. Once. Stepped to the door and paused, the way he'd paused outside my room that first night. "The photographs were never going to be used against you," he said without turning. "That was never what they were." He left. I sat for a long time in the chair with the window light moving across the floor and the photographs face down on his desk and the sound of my own heart making its argument without my permission. Chapter 8. What his hands can do. The attack came at 2 a.m. I was awake. I'd been awake for hours, lying in the yellow room watching the ceiling and turning the photographs over in my mind like stones I couldn't put down, when I heard it, not gunfire this time. Something quieter and more methodical. Glass, a door, the sound of a struggle contained by the lower floors of the house, then shouting, brief and sharp, and then nothing. And then a sound I recognized with a horrible animal certainty as a body hitting the floor. I was out of bed before I'd decided to move. The hallway was dark. I stayed flat against the wall and moved toward the staircase, telling myself to go back, lock the door. But my feet kept carrying me forward, as though my body had made a separate decision about where it needed to be. At the top of the stairs, I stopped. Below, in the entrance hall, 3 men I didn't recognize. One of them zip-tying the wrists of a figure I identified with a lurch as the young man from the car. The quiet, disciplined one. He was on his knees, blood from a cut on his forehead, and Nico. He was against the far wall. 2 men in front of him. And he was, and this is the part I couldn't process in real time, could only understand afterward. He was very deliberately not moving, hands visible, voice low. I couldn't hear what he was saying. I could see the geometry of it, 2 to 1, weapons visible. He was talking them down, or trying to, or buying time. The 3rd man looked up and found me on the stairs. Everything happened in the space between 2 breaths. The man on the stairs was moving toward me, and Nico, from across the room, without a clear angle, without a weapon in his hand, was already moving. Not slowly, not the controlled, deliberate pace I associated with him. Fast, absolute, decisive in a way that made the air change. What I saw in the next 40 seconds I will not fully describe, because I don't have language for the mechanics of it, and because what mattered wasn't the mechanics but the result. The 2 men who'd had him pinned did not have him pinned, and the 3rd man on the stairs was sitting down hard and not moving, and Nico was beside me with one hand on my arm, pulling me behind him, and breathing harder than I'd ever heard him breathe. 3 seconds of silence. Then the sound of the front door and more of his people coming in and voices in Italian, rapid and overlapping. I was shaking. I became aware of this slowly, the way you become aware of cold when you've been in it long enough to stop feeling it. My hands were shaking against my thighs, and my breath was coming in short, irregular pulls, and I couldn't make either of them stop. Nico turned. He looked at me. All of me, cataloging, checking. And then his hands came up and held my face, and he made me look at him. "Here," he said. "Look at me. Here." I looked. His face was a few inches from mine. There was blood on his collar, not his, I thought, not his, and his eyes were very focused and very present in a way that cut through the shaking. "Breathe," he said. I'm breathing. Slower. I tried. He held my face and waited, patient in the middle of everything, and I breathed slower. And the shaking began to subside at the edges. His thumbs were resting against my cheekbones. I was aware of every point of contact with a precision that felt inappropriate, given the circumstances, and also completely unavoidable. You should have stayed in your room, he said. I know. Why didn't you? I looked at him. In the dim hallway, with the sounds of his people clearing the lower floor, with blood on his collar and his hands on my face, the answer was so obvious and so inconvenient that I was surprised he was asking. I needed to know you were still. I stopped. He went very still. I needed to know, I said again, which was shorter and true, and told him everything anyway. Something in his face changed, not dramatically. This man didn't do dramatic, but a quiet shift. The way tectonic things move, slow and total and irreversible. He was still holding my face. I reached up and put my hand over his, the same gesture from the study, the day before, but different now because the chair between us was gone, and everything between us was gone, and there was only the hallway and the blood on his collar, and the fact that I had come down those stairs. I'm here, he said, quietly, like he was answering something I hadn't said aloud. I believe he was. Renata appeared at the foot of the stairs, took in the scene with zero readable expression. The three have been secured, she said. Alessandro is patched. You have a call in 10 minutes. Nico didn't move immediately. He looked at me for one more second, just one. The way you look at something you're memorizing before putting it away. Then he lowered his hands, stepped back, became the controlled, deliberate version of himself again. Go back to bed, he said. I won't sleep. I know. He turned toward the stairs. Neither will I. Chapter 9. The Weight of Wanting. He came to the yellow room at 4 a.m. He knocked, which I hadn't expected. He was a man who moved through space as though it belonged to him, and knocking was a kind of asking. I was sitting on the floor with my back against the bed, still shaking faintly in the way that continues long after the cause is gone, and I said, "Come in," because it was 4 a.m. and I was tired of walls. He'd changed his shirt. The blood was gone. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the fact that I was on the floor, and then crossed the room and sat down on the floor beside me with his back against the bed and his legs stretched out, and said nothing. I waited. He didn't speak. We sat there in the yellow lamp dark, and I could hear him breathing. Still slightly uneven, the only evidence that anything had happened, and I could smell the cedar and something underneath it that was just him, specific and difficult to name. Alessandro, I finally said. He's okay? 7 stitches, he's had worse. A pause. He would object to me telling you that. Is he young? He seems young. 23. Something in Nico's voice shifted minutely. He's been with me since he was 18. That's young to start. Yes. Another silence. Comfortable in a way that shouldn't have been possible, shouldn't have been earned yet. But it was. I owe you an apology, he said. I turned to look at him. His profile in the low light, the line of his jaw, the scar, the photographs, he continued. I would have told you. I had been constructing how to tell you. He paused on that phrase with what I recognized as distaste for what it revealed about him. That wasn't fair to you. No, I agreed. It wasn't. I am not accustomed to. He stopped. Started again. I operate in an environment where information is controlled by necessity. Partial disclosure is standard practice. I applied that to you. It was a mistake. Why did you tell me the truth tonight? About Danny? About the photographs stopping being standard? He was quiet for a long moment. Because you were shaking, he said, and the version of myself that maintains information control felt small in comparison. I thought about that. About a man who measured everything against its use and found, for the first time perhaps in a long time, that usefulness wasn't the right measurement. I'm still angry, I said. I know, and I'm still. I paused. I came down those stairs. You did. That was stupid. Strategically, yes. But I'd do it again. I looked at the window. The faint pre-dawn gray beginning at its edges. That's the part I don't know what to do with. He turned his head and looked at me. I could feel it before I saw it. Mara, he said. Just my name. The way he'd said it in the diner hallway, like it had settled somewhere without effort. I turned. The space between us was very small. The yellow lamp made everything amber and close. His eyes were doing that thing, landing and staying. And I was tired. I was tired of the wall I'd been maintaining since the kitchen, since the chair in the study, since his thumb against my wrist and my own pulse giving me away. He reached up and touched my hair. Very slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything. His hand settled against the side of my face, and I let my eyes close. When he kissed me, it was quiet and serious. The way he was not tentative, but careful. The way you are careful with something that matters. I kissed him back and felt the week collapse into a single point. All the fear and the anger and the strange domesticity of shared kitchens and morning light and sitting on floors at 4 a.m. It lasted a long time. When it ended, we stayed close, foreheads almost touching. This is complicated, I said. Extremely, he agreed. I'm not, I stopped. I don't know what I'm agreeing to. I know. His thumb traced my cheekbone. The same gesture as the hallway. I'm not asking you to agree to anything. Then what are you asking? He pulled back just far enough to see my face. His expression was open, in a way I suspected very few people ever saw. No calculation in it. No control. Just a man at 4 a.m. sitting on a floor, asking something he hadn't planned to ask. Stay, he said. Not here. Not because of danger. Just stay. I looked at him for a long time in the amber light. What does that mean for you? I asked. Honestly? In your life? What does stay mean? His jaw moved, the long pause that meant he was finding the true answer and not the convenient one. I don't entirely know, he said. I know that I haven't asked it before, and that I mean it. Outside, the dawn was arriving slowly, working its way through the gray. The house was quiet. Somewhere below, Alessandro was sleeping off his 7 stitches, and Renata was probably already making coffee, and the world Nico inhabited was 3 hours from resuming its demands. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He went very still, then settled. His hand found mine in the space between us. Don't make me a project, I said quietly into the silence. You're not. Don't let me become collateral. I won't. I believed him. I wasn't sure if that made me brave or foolish. Perhaps it made me both. And that was exactly the particular kind of person you had to be to sit on a floor at dawn with a man like this and feel, despite everything, like you were in the right place. Chapter 10. The last confession before light. The deal came apart on a Thursday. I know this because Thursdays are the days I'd started counting again. My first week at Rosario's had been a Thursday. My first good tip. My first double shift, alone. Thursdays were benchmarks. This one arrived cold and cloudless, the kind of November morning that makes the city look cleaned out, and by noon, everything that had been built across 9 days had a fault line running through it. The call came while I was in the kitchen with Renata. I heard Nico's voice from the study. Not the words, just the register. Low and precise, and then going quiet in a way that was worse than raised. He found me 20 minutes later, still in the kitchen. He stood in the doorway and I looked at his face and knew. Tell me, I said. The Sorrentis made a move on Carver's daughter. He was very still. An hour ago. She's alive. It was a warning. She's with my people. She's safe. A pause. For now. What does for now mean? He came in and sat at the table. He didn't do this often. Sitting at tables was domestic, was ordinary, was something I'd noticed he allowed himself only in the kitchen, only in the evening, only in spaces that weren't the study or the formal rooms. The fact that he did it now told me something. It means the Sorrentis have decided waiting is no longer their strategy, he said. They want a resolution before the end of the month. On their terms. And you? I have a counter, but it requires me to move tonight. He looked at his hands on the table. The ring. Not defensively. I understood what he meant without wanting to. Is there another way? I asked. I've been looking for another way for 8 months. His voice was even, but underneath it was the tiredness I'd first seen in the car, in the streetlight flash, and it was closer to the surface now. Tonight is the moment where all paths converge at the same point. The coffee was still warm in my mug. I wrapped both hands around it. What about the judges? I said. The ones your agreements covered. Can they? One of them came through this morning. Something shifted in his expression. That's the counter. We have enough to neutralize the Sorrentis' political leverage if I can get it to the right hands before midnight. Which requires you going out. Which requires me going out. I looked at him. Come back, I said. He looked up. That's all I'm saying. My voice was steady. I'd decided, somewhere between 4 a.m. and this Thursday morning, that I wouldn't perform calm. I didn't feel, but I also wouldn't manufacture fear. I could set down. Come back. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. The same gesture, reversed, and I felt his thumb against my wrist, and I let him feel my pulse. I intend to, he said. He left at 7. The house was full of quiet, directed motion, his people preparing, dispersing, the front door opening and closing with measured frequency. I stayed in the kitchen with Renata, who made dinner without being asked, and didn't speak, which I'd come to understand was her form of comfort. I ate alone at the kitchen table. I thought about Thursdays. At 11:15, a message came to my phone. The replaced one, with my contacts transferred. The one that had started to feel like mine. Delay. Don't sleep. I didn't. At 1 a.m., the front door opened. I heard him before I saw him. The particular cadence of his footsteps, the way they settled into the house, and something in the rhythm of them told me what I needed to know before I'd reached the hallway. He was walking steadily. He was here. He came around the corner and stopped when he saw me. His coat was wet. It had started raining again at midnight, of course it had. And there was a cut along his left forearm, neatly wrapped, that told a story I'd ask him about later. I crossed the hall. I put my hands on his face, the way he'd held mine on the stairs, and I looked at him. It's done, he said. Tell me, the information reached the right hands. The leverage is neutralized. The Sorrentis are managing a political crisis that will occupy them for months. He exhaled. A real exhale, the first one I'd seen that wasn't controlled. Carver's daughter is safe. I leaned my forehead against his. He brought his hands up and held my arms, and we stood there in the entrance hall with the rose wallpaper, and the amber light and the rain against the windows. And it occurred to me that this was what it felt like to have been afraid for someone and have them come back. Not relief exactly. Something more complicated. Something that meant the fear had been real, which meant what I felt was real, which meant I had crossed, fully and without apology, into territory I wasn't going back from. I stayed, I said. You stayed. I don't know what that means yet. For me. For my life. I know. He drew back enough to see my face. His expression was open again. That private face. The one I'd seen at 4 a.m. on the floor. We'll find out. That's not a plan, I said. No. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, something more honest than that. It's a beginning. Outside, the rain fell on the city the way it always did, without asking permission, without caring about the things it fell on, cold and indiscriminate and relentless. Inside, the roses repeated on the wallpaper, patient and permanent, all the way up the stairs. I took his hand. We went up.